On the morning of March 14, 2011, federal agents executed 26 search warrants on medical marijuana businesses across Montana.
I have no access to my medicine. How can they do this?
I'm one of the owners of Montana Cannabis. We caregive for hundreds of people that are sick, and right now their medicine's being destroyed. They're cutting it down, taking it for evidence. We've operated clearly within state law, so have all the other caregivers that they're raiding all across the state today.
Chris Williams is now facing the prospect of spending the rest of his life in prison. If he had good reason to believe he was following Montana law, how could this be? Last year I set out to make a documentary film to explore in part how such legal inconsistencies have contributed to the failure of the war on drugs. Let's go back to the beginning. I met Chris Williams 7 months before federal agents raided his medical marijuana business, one of the largest medical marijuana providers in the state. Montana Cannabis seemed to be complying with Montana's state law. Chris acted on the advice of a lawyer and relied on conversations with county attorneys. He and his partners even gave routine tours to state law enforcement and community leaders.
To walk through a greenhouse over 100 feet long full of cannabis, and to have our local sheriff's deputies come and do tours with me, to have our drug task force come and do tours with me, that was amazing.
So when you harvest this plant, do you harvest the whole plant?
Look at the size of that. That really looks good.
It does. It smells good too.
Well, I never imagined that I'd ever see a plant this big. I mean, this is just in Montana.
In 2004, Montana had passed a voter initiative to legalize medical marijuana. And today, 18 states and Washington, D.C. have these laws on their books. But there's a big catch. Medical marijuana is still illegal under federal law. The Controlled Substances Act of 1970 makes that very clear. And the federal government has discretion about how to enforce laws in medical marijuana states. The Obama administration seemed to make federal policy more lenient for medical marijuana. A 2009 memo from the Justice Department indicated that the federal government should not focus federal resources on individuals whose actions are in clear and unambiguous compliance with existing state laws. So Chris Williams had good reason to think he was safe from federal prosecution. Fast forward 7 months from the time I first met him, and it was clear that he was wrong. And Montana Cannabis was not the only place affected. Last year, without warning, the feds began to crack down on growers in medical marijuana states across the country. Suddenly it appeared that the Department of Justice's 2009 memo was no longer in effect. It was an unexpected return to the failed policy of prohibition and punishment. In a subsequent memo last year, the Justice Department clarified the policy to say that medical marijuana patients would be free from prosecution, but not industrial growers. Congress, the department noted, has determined that marijuana is a dangerous drug. So now, apparently, those who grew it on a commercial scale were dangerous criminals. Which meant that large growers like Chris Williams, in spite of their efforts to follow state laws, were not safe from federal prosecution.
After the raid, it was really hard on my son continuing school. My son's teachers had open class discussions about whether or not medical marijuana was right, about whether or not I should go to jail. Folks that I felt great support from just within the community have turned their backs completely. The most grim thing that I could think of would be my son having to go into state care. That's really what I fear the most.
In the end, Chris Williams decided to take his case before a jury. On September 27th, he was convicted on marijuana charges and for possessing firearms during a drug trafficking offense. He is currently behind bars, and he faces a minimum mandatory sentence of more than 80 years in prison. Today, about 75% of Americans support legalizing medical marijuana.
I am viewed as a criminal. I do not feel like a criminal. The people I work with are not criminals. We are following laws. We're not breaking them.
If the vast majority of us believe that legitimate patients should have safe and reliable access to cannabis, we need to reform federal law to be consistent with the states. Lifting the cloud of uncertainty that puts growers and patients at risk.